Let's go live to Richard Di Natale, the Greens leader in Melbourne. You heard there what Angus Taylor had to say about your lawn and the state having their own energy emission reductions. What do you have to say to that?
Oh, well, anything that Angus Taylor says needs to be understood that it's coming from somebody who doesn't believe in the science of climate change. I mean, the reality is Angus Taylor is part of the cabal of climate deniers within the coalition, and of course Scott Morrison has put him in charge of a portfolio effectively reflecting his own views, the man who waved a lump of coal around Parliament. So, you know, you've got a bloke in there who's doing the bidding of the fossil fuel industry. No surprise that he'd be in there critical of what's going on right around the world, and that's a transition away from coal to renewable energy. And any responsible government would be planning for that transition. The Greens went to the last election with a package that would transition away from coal to renewables, 180,000 new jobs right around the country. And what should be being developed in the Latrobe Valley and indeed right around the country is a clear transition pathway that makes it absolutely crystal clear that every one of those workers in the Latrobe Valley will have a job, not just in the coming few years, but for their kids and their grandkids in a thriving renewable energy sector. And that's what responsible government should be doing right now.
Some of the crossbench senators, your fellow colleagues, are calling on the government to give an energy a guarantee of sorts, of price and a level of gas when it comes to passing this tax cut package. Where do the Greens sit on this? I mean, do we just assume that you're going to vote against the package, or are you trying to negotiate as well?
No, we don't support the tax cut package because it will make economic inequality much worse in Australia. Look, what we've got is a government that's continuing with the same old failed trickle-down economics. You give a big tax cut to people who need it least and somehow everyone's going to be better off. It doesn't work that way. What we should be doing is, rather than giving a massive tax cut, and the overwhelming majority of these tax cuts will flow to people who don't need them. What we've got, I think it's over $90 billion of the $158 billion that goes in stage 3 of the tax cuts. That means that politicians, bankers, chief executives all get the benefit of a massive tax cut. And at the same time, we've got people on Newstart committed to living in poverty. No, we shouldn't be supporting this package. What we should be supporting is an increase in Newstart. We should be funding the transition. We just heard
the government
about how critical it is.
Just did won an election. Where do you sit on their mandate?
Oh, well, this mandate argument's nonsense. The reality is that 1.5 million people voted for the Greens in the Senate to hold the government to account. And so we've got a mandate to keep prosecuting all of the things that we put forward to the Australian community: a transition away from coal to renewables, investing in new stuff, providing decent health care. When you provide tax cuts, the other side of that equation is we're also then cutting funding for schools, for hospitals. We're not going to get Medicare-funded dental care. We're not going to get all the things that we know we could have if we decided to fund essential services over tax cuts for people who don't need them. There's a lot of discussion about whether someone on 200 grand's top end of town. I'll tell you, if you're on 200 grand a year or more, you're doing pretty well in Australia.
Is it the top end of town?
When you consider that there are people, you're doing well. You can use whatever language you like, but you're in the top few % of income earners in the country. And let's not forget the Labor Party spent an election campaign making that point validly, that we have economic inequality in Australia. And what we should be focused on doing is addressing, you've got people who can't put a roof over their head, who can't feed their kids because they're committed to a life of poverty because Newstart is so low. They're the sort of things we should be investing in. People can't afford out-of-pocket costs in healthcare, the cost of medicines, the cost of seeing a specialist. They're the things we need to invest in. School fees. Now, if you're going to give a tax cut to politicians, to executives, to bankers, overfunding somebody who's living a life of poverty, then that says you've got your priorities all wrong.
Well, Senator, appreciate your time this morning. Let's talk soon. We'll see you next week. I hope you bring your sleeping bag because you might be there for a while in the Senate.
See you in the big house.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.